Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Dam, and you are watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies, and today I'm going to be telling you about the new Netflix Original Sci Fi movie, Space Sweepers, with no spoilers. So at the time of me recording this, Space Sweepers is the newest Netflix original sci-fi movie. It is from South Korea and was originally slated to be a major theatrical release in South Korea and likely would have been released in some manner around the world, including the United States, but because of the pandemic, it is now a Netflix original, and I gotta say, it's one of the best Netflix original sci-fi movies I've ever seen. I'll explain why as we go forward with no spoilers. So the setup for this one is it takes place way in the future, and there is what is called the orbit, which is kind of like a city in orbit around Earth, but instead of like one giant location, which there is one of those, there's highways and all sorts of other things happening all around the orbit of the Earth. So this is not an intergalactic space movie. This does take place just outside of the atmosphere of Earth, but that is one of its strong suits. Another setup thing they give you right off the bat is that the Earth is dying, which is something we've seen in sci-fi movies plenty of times before, but only an elite few. By few, I mean hundreds of thousands of people, but a small percentage of the population of Earth is able to go into the orbit, and it immediately drew comparisons to Elysium. So right off the bat, I was like, okay, let's see, is this going to be better than Elysium? Because that movie had a lot of promise, and it just got muddy and messy and just didn't quite work as well as I think a lot of people would have liked. However, Space Sweepers continued to surprise me. Not in an incredible way. This didn't blow my hair back and change the way I look at movies or anything, but looking at it as a Netflix original movie from South Korea, this is a dazzling movie. It really is. It looks amazing, and it's not just the look of all the special effects, because ultimately what you get here is an animated movie with a few people walking around, but it just looked so good. And again, I'm not talking about how convincing it looked. It's beautiful. All the spaceships just look incredible. They're kind of junky and pieced together looking, but there's bright colors, and it just really is constantly this visual feast. And even though it is showing me different things I'd never seen before, it also reminded me a lot of a handful of movies, one being Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, even though this isn't an intergalactic thing with all sorts of different species and stuff, the look of the spaceships reminded me a lot of the Junkers from Guardians of the Galaxy, which are some of the more interesting characters in that series. And that's about where the comparison ends. This movie is not nearly as good as Guardians of the Galaxy. It's not as funny or entertaining, but it's not too far off either. There's also some comparisons that could be made to movies like Blade Runner and Alien. While it's not as heavy as those movies and the drama isn't as intense, the vision of the future that it paints is pretty parallel. It almost seems like it could take place in the same universe, except the tone is a little bit different. Much like both of those series, the future is sort of ruled by a tyrannical corporation rather than like a central government or anything like that. So there's a major parallel there, and then just again with the Earth dying and corporations running everything, that's about where those comparisons stop, but they're pretty good comparisons to make. And the last one that it sort of reminded me of was Gravity, because there is the danger of space junk hurling through and destroying all these structures that have been built in the orbit, and that cues the Space Sweepers, which are independent groups of people who collect space junk and bring it to essentially a dump, a giant ball of garbage, and just get paid to salvage junk. That's all that they do. But our main characters get swept up into a pretty fantastic adventure. And that's what this movie is. It is just a fun space adventure movie. One of my only gripes with this movie is that it is very much painted like a PG-13 movie. There's quite a bit of killing in it, but almost no blood, so it's filmed very much like a PG-13 movie, yet they drop random F-bombs that seem completely unnecessary. Odds are that's more in line with the rating system from South Korea, and it doesn't quite jive with the American rating system. So you get a movie that's not really family friendly, but it easily easily could have been with just a couple of little edits. Now, you do have to keep in mind, this is from South Korea, and there is a little bit of silliness, a little bit of excess silliness, to be honest, and I think a lot of that results from just cultural differences and changes in the translation. People aren't quite saying what it sounds like they're saying if you listen to it dubbed, but that is a minor nitpick. In fact, the dubbing, I listened to the dubbing and the subtitles on this one. I didn't watch it all the way through twice, but the dubbing is quite good. It's not perfect, but it's not silly and cheesy. The voice actors did a good job of matching the performance of the actual actors, so do not let subtitles get in the way of you enjoying this movie. Now back to the adventure part, there are a ton of action sequences in this movie, and as I said, they're essentially animated, but I didn't mind. A lot of movies are made that way nowadays, including the latest Star Wars movies. They're basically produced in a similar way. Obviously, this one was done for much less money, and honestly, it is much more successful in what it tries to do. Whereas the new Star Wars movies basically just repeated the original movies without the heart and spirit of them, this one does its own thing. While it did remind me of several other movies, the core story was unique unto itself. Admittedly, though, it does have some of the basic elements. Trying to save a girl, trying to stop a bomb from killing everyone on Earth. Basic stuff that you see in all of these, again, PG-13 action adventure movies. But I didn't mind that. I thought the characters were interesting. I thought the world was way more interesting than anything I've seen in a Netflix original. I wanted to spend more time in this orbit world. I would have happily watched an entire series to spend 10 hours in this environment. It was that cool. Some other cool elements. There's a robot that I think cleverly wears clothes. That was a really interesting way to add some humanity to this robot, that they like to wear shirts and stuff. That was just an interesting little touch that added to the overall experience. And they had an interesting villain. Like I said, he is the head of a corporation who is sort of controlling everything, and he's this evil sort of fire-breathing villain. Performed really well. They went a little over the top, but kind of in the typical vein that, again, a PG-13 action-adventure movie would do. They sort of simplify things by making him have some weird physical changes, kind of similar to Paul Bettany in Solo. Another parallel I could draw, this movie was way more entertaining than Solo, despite the fact that that movie had boundless resources at its disposal. This movie still managed to hold my interest and keep me entertained a lot more than Solo did. And I kind of liked Solo compared to some of the other Star Wars movies. To be clear, I'm not saying this is better than the original Star Wars movies. Hell, I don't even think I would say this is better than Rogue One, but it's certainly better and is a stronger effort than the new trilogy. Yeah, it goes into some predictable directions, but not nearly as predictable as all the schlock that they stuffed into these 2-3-hour toy commercials that Disney has produced lately, because that's what the new Star Wars movies are. I hate to tell you, they're desperate attempts to sell merch. They hammered those scripts out super quick. Kathleen Kennedy, the producer, said so herself. They did not try to make really good movies with those. They just tried to make money, and good for them, they did. But the crew behind this did put some effort into making something fun and entertaining, and you can tell when you watch it. Additionally, if this gets you hungry for some more sci-fi movies, my next video is going to be a list of 20 of the best sci-fi movies currently available on Netflix, minus this one because I've recorded it already, but honestly, having just watched it, I would probably put this one up in the top 5, if not the number 5 or number 4 spot on that list. So look forward to that video sometime soon, but I will keep making these video reviews as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for watching this special episode, and you will see me on the next one.